After that, we return to the present, and he is more inspired than ever. Polyman draws his white arrow and shoots it at Mirai. The protagonist manages to block it, then takes a few steps forward. At this moment, we see the masked boy who had escaped earlier recording them and broadcasting what is happening on national television. Then, we see both of them 20 meters apart, and with each arrow shot, they advance, thus shortening the distance between them. Confidently, Polyman talks about what is happening with the candidates, affirming that he doesn't care if they are angels or extraterrestrials. All he cares about is power. Later, we see national security searching for the culprits for the transmission. Mirai then launches another red arrow, and Polyman barely manages to dodge it. This puts Mirai at a disadvantage as the distance between them closes while they advance, and this time, he may not be able to evade the attack. Polyman then launches his attack, and Mirai manages to block the white arrow with his red arrow, causing it to rebound to Polyman. They both continue to advance. After this, Polyman tells Mirai that he is nothing special and probably grew up poor and friendless, unlike Polyman, who is special. The protagonist becomes angry and shouts back, saying there shouldn't be a difference between superior and inferior people. In response, Polyman says that if he were God, he would create a world where everyone is rich and, at the same time, reveals that he would kill all the poor to achieve this. Mirai tells him he has no right to deny happiness to anyone, but Polyman reaffirms his belief, speaking ill of Haim. Then, it is mentioned how a friend of his said he would wish for money or eliminate all the ugly people in the world. Meanwhile, Mitsu discovers Polyman's true identity as she watches the broadcast. People react differently to the situation. Some agree, some don't, and some mock it, believing it's a joke. To conclude his speech, Polyman adds that he will let some poor and ugly people live to have them as slaves. However, Mirai interrupts him and says the fight continues. Both are now 5 meters apart, and if Mirai fails, Polyman will likely kill him with his white arrow. As Mirai hesitates to shoot, Polyman asks why he warns him before attacking and why he doesn't attack by surprise. Mirai doesn't answer and prepares to run towards Polyman instead of shooting his arrow, surprising Polyman. Nevertheless, Polyman shoots his white arrow at point-blank range, but this proves futile as Mirai easily blocks it with his red arrow from such a close distance. After that, he jumps on Polyman and tries to stab him with the arrow, but when he does, the arrow doesn't penetrate because apparently Polyman has a red arrow lodged in him. Polyman takes advantage of this to draw his white arrow and try to counterattack, but Mirai gains more momentum and pushes him so that both arrows deviate. After this, Mirai sprouts his wings and grabs Polyman's arm, then covers his face with one of the wings, preventing him from knowing in which direction to launch the arrow. Polyman, trying to escape, takes out a knife from his suit and tries to stab the protagonist, but since the suit is armored, he only receives blows. Later, he kicks him in the abdomen, but despite this, the protagonist doesn't let go. This angers Polyman, who shouts at his angel to change his white arrow to his free left arm, but he doesn't respond. At that moment, Saki flies and grabs Polyman's free arm to subdue him between her and Mirai. Polyman then tries to escape using his wings, but Mirai tells Saki to use their rings as handcuffs to completely stop him. After this, Nanato takes advantage of the situation and prepares his machine gun, then points it at Polyman while we see his life slowly fading away due to cancer. With his last strength, he pulls the trigger while having memories of his family. Polyman tries to use his wings to fly, but Mirai and Saki also subdue him using their wings. Seeing that he can't escape, Polyman starts screaming for his life as he feels the bullets piercing through his suit, slowly perforating his body, causing him a quick and painful death. Later, people scream as they witness such a death on television, and we see Suzuki taking care of broadcasting the fight to the world, screaming with happiness at Polyman's death. Now, when everything is over, Saki goes to check on Nanato, but it's too late as the cancer has left him unconscious. At that moment, the red arrow lodged in Polyman comes out and returns directly to its owner along with all his arrow rings and wings. After this, the angels take the souls of Haim and Polyman, and there, Mirai hears Nanato coughing, so he decides to take him to a hospital. At the hospital, the doctors can't do anything but keep him alive for a few more minutes, so they ask his family to come in and say goodbye. Later, we see that his daughter was asleep, and his wife simply took out his last cigarette and, while crying, placed it in his mouth, but it fell on its own, and as it touched the ground, Nenato's vital signs stopped, and he died while unconscious. Then, his angel arrives and gently takes his soul, not without taking a moment to express amazement at the actions he did in life. Before leaving, she offers her wings and arrows to Mirai and Saki as a last token of gratitude. After this, the angel goes to heaven along with Nenato's soul, and Mirai's red arrow lodged in Nenato disappears. At night, National Security investigates the crime scene along with Polyman's remains, and they identify where the technology of his suit came from and his identity. The detective requests to expand the investigation to find the other candidates for God. Later, at the hospital, we see that Mirai is shattered and feels guilty that Neonato became a killer. At that moment, Saki tries to calm him down by saying that thanks to that, Neonato saved many people, and she also talks about how much effort the protagonist put in. Mirai turns around and sees the red arrow shining while Saki speaks, but they tell him that he has no choice but to wait for the 33 days to end. Saki defends herself and tells him that it's not the arrow speaking, but it's what she truly feels since apparently she liked Mirai before he was arrowed, and after the fight, she discovered that she loves him more than ever, with or without the red arrow. After this, Mirai reveals to Saki that Polyman already had an arrow lodged, so he was being controlled by another candidate. Later, it seems that Haim's angel is friends with the child's angel who broadcasted the fight, and he was the one who revealed Polyman's identity. In the past, the child arrowed Polyman while he was spying on the archer at school, and then Suzuki asked him to take him home and made Polyman promise to keep all his belongings when he died. In the present, Saki is preparing a meal for Mirai, but she is afraid it will turn out bad. On the other hand, Mirai is thinking about strategies with Revel regarding how many candidates are left and who has arrows or wings. When Saki went to bring him food, she saw he was asleep next to Nenato's suit remains, so she let him rest and covered him with a blanket. Then she tries to kiss him, but the sleeping protagonist said Nenato's name, which stopped her. The next day, Mirai wakes up and sees Saki heated a meal for breakfast. He asks Saki about the angels, and she tells him they are giving them some space. After this, she invites him to have breakfast together, and when Mirai takes the first bite, he is amazed. Saki thinks it's because the food is too spicy, but Mirai tells her it's the first time in a long time that he can taste the flavor of food since he always ate alone and lost his sense of taste due to abuse. At the same time, there is a meeting among the remaining angels, as apparently all the candidates who wanted to kill the others to become God are dead, and now only those who wanted to negotiate remain. An angel asks if any of their candidates is really willing to be God, but no one answers because most of the living candidates prefer to enjoy their luxuries with the arrows and wings and wait for the candidate to God to decide on their own. Then an angel speaks, Penema, the angel of games, and says that his candidate is someone very active regarding the selection of the new god, and this candidate is Suzuki, who manipulated Polyman, and he is now flying freely through the city. At that moment, a girl takes a photo of him, and he crosses in front of her, which attracts everyone's attention. Suzuki openly shouts that he is a candidate for God. Later, Saki prepares sandwiches for Mirai, as she remembered that was what they ate as children when they went to the park. The protagonist smiles and tells her that his wish is for them to always be happy together. Apparently, Suzuki, the one who manipulated Polyman, decided to speak in a national television interview and said that he is a 6th grade elementary school student. He then comments that he doesn't want to be God since he was the one who broadcasted Polyman's death. The National Guard tries to censor the media and send soldiers, but before that happens, Suzuki reveals everything about the candidates and the election of the new god, as well as his angel's name. The journalist asks him if he became a candidate by trying to take his own life, but Suzuki denies this and simply says he was bored with life, since his parents were never around, and he had no friends. One night, he saw some pills on the table, and when he tried to tidy them up, an angel appeared. Then he reveals everything about the wings and arrows, and about Polyman, and how he could arrow him. In the end, Suzuki says that to decide the new god, all the citizens of the world must vote for one of the 6 remaining candidates, urging everyone in the world to search for the candidates to force them to reveal their identities. After this, Suzuki takes out his cell phone with a photo of Mirai and says that he votes for the protagonist to be the new god. Then he proposes to the other candidates to meet and vote for Mirai to be the new god. On the other hand, we see a candidate who is enjoying her luxuries and tells her angel that she also supports Mirai. In a change of scene, Saki asks Revel if being God is enough for everyone to approve it, to which he responds that first Mirai must proclaim himself a god, and it doesn't count if he does it under the effects of a red arrow, although if threatened with the white arrow, and says that he will become a god. Then we see that while Suzuki is distracted with his cell phone, the reporter is informed that the police will enter to capture him, so she is told that she must distract him for longer. Several soldiers surround him and shoot him with nets, but Suzuki realizes this and uses the super speed of his wings and escapes from there. On the other hand, we see Mizu on a date with the archer, who is now his girlfriend, and they see that several candidates who were eliminated are revealed on television. They also see that on social media, they believe he is a candidate because of his grades and for getting a beautiful girlfriend, besides being friends with Polyman. Then Mizu realizes that a man is watching them, so he takes his girlfriend's arm and they leave. On the other hand, there is a meeting between high-ranking Japanese officials where they talk about if the candidates are real assassins who can easily kill people, and they are thinking of putting them at the level of danger of a nuclear bomb, as they consider the candidates' weapons. Back with the protagonist, when he and Saki finish their meal, Saki suggests to Mirai to run away together somewhere where no one can find them. But the protagonist knows that many of those words are influenced by the arrow, so he refuses. Then he reassures her and tells her that there is a lot of false information, so it's impossible for them to be found. He tells her they have to go to school together to act like normal students and not raise any suspicions. The days pass and the protagonist sees that Saki is ashamed of her scars, but still decides to go to school with Mirai. At school, they spend the whole day listening to others talk and joke about the candidates for God. But when Mirai was walking back home, a detective from the National Security stops him and asks him to get into his car. Mirai steps back, and the man gets out of the car showing his ID. In defense of this, the protagonist takes out his wings and his red arrow, even though the detective can't see them. But the detective concludes that he took them out because of his posture and asks him if the arrow he took out was the red or the white one. After this, he threatens him that one of his colleagues is with Saki. Mirai, upon hearing this, runs towards the temple where she was, and discovers that Saki had arrowed the detective because she had approached her by surprise. There, the detective asks his colleague a question, and she replies that she now loves Saki more than anyone else. The detective is surprised by this and tells them that his colleague was also his fiancé. He also comments that other countries, besides Japan, are already mobilizing to kidnap the candidates, so they are an easy target. So the detective tells them that his name is Masaya and that he wants to help them. He says that even though almost no one knows they are candidates, it will soon be publicly revealed, so he asks them to go with him. But the protagonist and Saki are suspicious, so they both take out their wings and arrows. However, the man insists, telling them that they can fly away at any time. Upon hearing this, they accept, and in the car, Masaya tells them that the government ordered to detain all the candidates, and that it was also his fiancée who discovered their identities. But they decided to act on their own because they need them since they also found out who the other candidates are and want their collaboration to find and protect them, as other countries want to use them as weapons. After this, they arrived at the apartment where Masaya lives with his fiancée and told them that as long as they stay there, no one will find them. Then he tells them that they have their cell phones and offered them new disposable ones. At that moment, Masaya gets a call from work, and to avoid attracting attention, they ask them not to leave while they return and leave them alone together with a cat. There, Mirai asks Nas if what the detective said was true, and she tells him that it is true, that he was not lying about his intentions. Then we see Masaya with his boss, Led, who says that they still haven't discovered the protagonist's identity because the photo they have of Mirai is protected with a code that prevents facial recognition. After this, they leave the office and Masaya receives a call informing him that a candidate has already been caught, so they decide to quickly return home. There they tell Mirai and Saki what happened, and upon hearing this, they finally agree to collaborate. They spend the whole night explaining everything about the candidates and their powers. Masaya, upon learning everything, thinks that Mirai is dangerous because he has the white arrow, but then he is glad that he hasn't used it on anyone yet, even though he fought for his life against Polyman. After this, he suggests that it would be a good idea to give the wings to his fiancée, taking advantage of the fact that she has already been arrowed. Saki agrees and offers her the wings, giving her the ability to also see the angels. After this, the woman starts to float. Masaya then says that he also wants to see the angels, but now it's not convenient for them to use more red arrows. He then asks the angels what they really are, because although he can't see them, he knows they are in the room. Revel refuses to answer and simply says that they are just angels. After this, Masaya shows the protagonist and Saki the identities of the candidates that the Japanese government knows so far, and also shows them the candidate they caught. Her name is Yuri, and she's the girl who lived in luxury on a deserted island. He also shows them the suspects who could be candidates, and one of them is the leader of a sect who proclaims himself as God. Later, Mirai investigates him at night and confronts him with a red arrow, but he didn't even have to use it because he saw that the man didn't react when he saw him with his arrow, so he was a fraud. Then we see the second suspect, called Mizu, who is Polyman's friend. And other suspects were some students who apparently lost their family and friends in just 3 months. After that, Saki gives a red arrow to the detective's fiancé so she can also protect herself. The next day, Mizu says goodbye to his girlfriend, and there Mirai appears and confronts him with his white arrow. Mizu begs for his life and asks him not to harm him. Mirai, seeing this, decides to change his arrow for the red one and arrow him. Under his control, Mirai asks if he is a candidate, and he says yes. So Mirai orders him to stay with them there. Mirai and Saki believe that Mizu's angel is second rank, so he only has the red arrow. After this, they decide to go after the other possible candidates and arrive at the house of a candidate named Naka who manipulated his whole family to take their own lives, and he is also about to do the same with his brother. But when he was about to arrow his brother, Mirai arrives and stops him using his own arrow as a shield. They then discover that his angel is the angel of darkness, and upon hearing this, the protagonist asks Mizu what his angel is, and at that moment, he reveals that he is not actually a candidate and tells them that he lied because he thought that if he told the truth, they would kill him. After this, Naka tells the protagonist and Saki to kill him and reveals that his grandfather was very ill and suffering, so he arrowed him and asked him to end his life, and then his grandfather removed the respirator to end his pain. He also mentions that his mother was unfaithful to his father with a younger guy, so they divorced, and his father fell into depression. So he also arrowed his father and asked him to die, and the next day he woke up lifeless in the lake, and he also did this to his mother's young boyfriend. Then he says that he doesn't plan to be God, but he does plan to use the red arrow for people who want to die. Mizu tells him that doing that is a crime, and it seems that Naka didn't know this, so he says that he won't do it anymore, but before that, he asks to end his brother's suffering and then take his own life. Mirai, upon seeing this, prevents it. Naka asks for a reason to keep living. Mizu interrupts them and says that even if you think you don't have friends who would be affected by your death, there are, and he gives the example of Polyman since he had no friends or girlfriend because he was very arrogant. But Mizu was the only one who spent time with him, and when Polyman died, despite his actions, losing that friend affected him a lot. He even says that thanks to him, he was able to meet and get close to his current girlfriend since they sometimes watched her together. After that, he tells him that if he falls in love, he won't want to die anymore. Naka gets up and accepts the fact that if he dies, it may worry or affect others, and they decide not to arrow his brother. After that, he asks everyone to leave, but Revel explains that they need him with them to cast his vote in the election for the next god, and also tells him about other governments' plans to kidnap the candidates, and with no other option, Naka agrees to go with them. After a while, they all take them to the detective's house and introduce them, and when Naka sees the detective's fiancé, he gets very nervous and goes to hide on the other side of the house. After this, the detective reviews the known candidates and they discuss the identity of the last candidate for God, and after this, they agree to find the last candidate. The days passed and the government accepted the existence of the candidates for God, but still, half of the population did not believe it to be true. One day, Mirai and Saki decide to appear flying with their suits in the middle of the city to speak to the citizens about the debate to choose a god. At that moment, Suzuki appears flying and tells him that he is happy to see him but does not believe that he is the real one, so he points his red arrow at him. They also go on the defensive and use their arrows. At that moment, Suzuki launches his arrow and Mirai blocks it, proving to be the real one, and Suzuki, seeing this, gets excited and asks him to do it again, but Mirai tells him that he wants to talk to him privately elsewhere. Suzuki agrees, and they fly away, and in the sky, Mirai reveals his face along with Saki and asks him if he has the white arrow. Suzuki tells them that he does, and they ask him to collaborate. After that, Mirai gives her a disposable phone and decides to go for the candidate Yuri, who is being held captive by the government. At night, as the angels can pass through walls, Revel, Nas, and the other angels go to talk to her. They tell her to act as if she doesn't see them so that no one suspects anything, and then they explain the plan to gather all the candidates in front of the world so that the last candidate appears, thus peacefully choosing the new god. She agrees, and now they plan a way to escape. Suddenly, she falls unconscious to the ground. The guards, knowing that she had tried to commit suicide twice in the past, are alerted and send 3 people to investigate. As they approach slowly, Yuri turns around and shoots them all with the red arrow, then asks them to get her out of there. They agree and start the escape. As they cross the corridors, they encounter several agents, so they decide to take another route and enter a room. Upon entering, the guards shoot at the camera and window frames. Then, someone jumps out of the windows covered with a curtain and runs towards the forest. Several agents pursue her and end up surrounding her, but upon capturing her, they discover that it was actually one of the agents wearing a dress and a wig, and we see Yuri using a black agent's suit to escape in the opposite direction. Free from the government, Yuri meets the other candidates, who introduce themselves and offer her angel wings so she can also fly. As they fly away, Suzuki says goodbye and Yuri asks why. He says it's because of his actions and because he has a white arrow, but the others still don't trust him enough to reveal where they live. After a few days, crowds of people started protesting in favor of the candidates being able to meet, while others believe they only bring misfortune. On the other hand, in the detective's house, they debate about which of the candidates will become God, and it seems that many agree that Mirai should be chosen, but he doesn't feel worthy yet. However, before continuing, one of the candidates asks Los Angeles for more information. The Angel of Darkness seems willing to talk, but Revel stops him, threatening that they could demote him and take away his candidate's wings. Still, Naka insists, and his angel decides to speak anyway, mentioning that the winning god may not only erase everything that happened during this election time, but also allow the candidates to keep their wings and arrows. Additionally, the god will have a white arrow and will be able to use the red arrow without limitations, controlling or exterminating humans. Hearing this, Mirai says that none of this benefits humanity, to which the angel responds that it's because humans are inferior to heavenly beings. Finally, he says that one of the 6 candidates will become God, leave Earth, and observe humanity from the sky, unable to stay on Earth. Several candidates say they choose to continue living to be happy on Earth. Naka says he wants to run for candidacy, and Yuri agrees as long as she can use the red arrow. But we see that Mirai disagrees with keeping the wings and arrows, believing that everyone should find their happiness on their own. Upon hearing this, Naka suggests that Mirai should be the new god, but they are interrupted by Suzuki, who calls them on the phone and suggests they decide by voting, and everyone agrees to this. We see Yuri voting for Naka, along with Saki and Naka himself, while Suzu also accepts him as god and gives him her vote. But the decision of the last candidate is still pending. But one of the angels warns them that it won't be easy since the accompanying angel is of destruction and mentions that no matter where their candidate goes, there will always be destruction there. That same afternoon, we see a well-known professor named Gaku being congratulated for one of his lectures. However, he ignores them and keeps walking, feeling dissatisfied despite having won a Nobel Prize. Then, his angel named Muni asks him what he's thinking about, and he says he's only thinking about what he'll do next. He comments that his angel chose him because he's the only one who can uncover the secrets behind the angels and the god selection process. At the same time, we see the angels of the other candidates speaking privately about what was said about God, and that if the Angel of Darkness had spoken too much, they would have demoted him, and Naka would have died instantly. Finally, the candidates prepare themselves and bid farewell to the detective. They appear in the middle of the city in front of thousands of people, and Muni appears in front of them. At the same time, the national security is planning how to capture them. Muni speaks to them and asks what they would do if they were God, but they don't respond and ask her where their candidate is. But she responds that they won't see him until they answer her question. Then, Yuri tells her that they have already chosen a candidate to be God, and upon hearing this, Muni says that then there will be no deal and they won't see their candidate. The angel bids farewell, but before leaving, Mirai stops her. While they talk, several military helicopters arrive at full speed, and seeing them, all the citizens run in fear. At that moment, the professor calls the prime minister and asks him not to harm the candidates, but the minister tells him that they were only sent to capture them, not to attack them. However, Gaku insists and tells him that in 24 hours, he will prove that they are not a danger because he has vital information about the sky. Seeing the helicopters, the candidates decide to go to different parts of the country. After this, they all receive a message saying that the minister withdrew all his military troops, but then several drones surround them, and in front of the television, they decide to talk about their plans as gods so that the last candidate appears. Thus, one by one, they begin to speak about their ideal world. Naka talks about a world where you can die whenever you want, Yuri about a world without work and worries, Suzuki about a world where you can play with your friends and there is no school or cell phones. But then says that being a candidate is fun, so he would create a world where everyone had white arrows. Then, Saki talks about a world where everyone is kind and can smile, and finally, Mirai talks about if he were God, he wouldn't do anything. After this, they all gather again to tell the last candidate to come with them to talk. Upon hearing this, Gaku opens the window and disappears in front of his companion, finally appearing in front of them. There, Naka recognizes him as the professor who won a Nobel Prize. Then, he asks Gaku to go to a more private place, but he refuses because he thinks that the whole world should know too. After this, he talks about a theory he has and says that Polyman was right to believe that there is no God in reality and that the God who created this selection of candidates is false. Then he asks Mirai why he wouldn't do anything, and the protagonist responds that everyone must live by their own means. Then Gaku asks what came first, humanity or God, but no one knows how to answer. Then, Gaku begins to talk about a theory and the evolution of species as well as the creation of human beings. And his theory is that God is false and is nothing more than a collection of common thoughts that grows as people believe in God. But as believers are becoming fewer and fewer, he became desperate and tricked the angels into initiating a selection of candidates. Gaku tells them that he planned for the election of God to be broadcasted worldwide, and if a candidate is chosen, everyone will believe in God again. In that, Gaku tells everyone to stop asking their gods for help and instead ask another human for help instead of praying, as he believes that science and technology will soon achieve everything, concluding that humanity doesn't need any god. Then, we see a group of snipers preparing to shoot all the candidates. Later, Revel, who has all the knowledge, talks about how prayers are the support of God at the beginning of heaven, but still, Gaku suspects that some of the angels already know the truth and don't want to do anything about it. But the candidates doubted his theory except for Naka, who believes him and thinks he's right. In that, Yuri asks if there is a way to make choosing a god not mandatory, to which Gaku says there's a way. Then, Suzuki discovers soldiers with guns aimed at them and tells the others. Suzuki innocently points his red arrow at them and asks if he should shoot them. Mirai yells at him to get away quickly, but then the soldier shoots Suzuki, and then all the other soldiers start shooting. Later, all the candidates fly at maximum speed to dodge the bullets, but when Mirai was about to take Suzuki's body, Gaku appears and takes him in his arms and goes far away. When they see that they keep shooting, the candidates decide to go to a safe place. Later, Gaku sees that Suzuki won't survive, so he takes out his white arrow and stabs him, receiving all his rings of wings and arrows. On the other hand, in the detective's house, the candidates receive a call from Suzuki's cell phone, and when they answer, Gaku asks them to put it on speakerphone and tells them that Suzuki died and kept all his rings. He also tells them that he just wanted to see people's reaction before meeting again. After this, he hangs up and the call ends, and in private, Gaku asks Naka if he would allow himself to be stabbed with the white arrow, and he says yes. He also asks if he gave him the white arrow and asked him to kill him if he would, which he also says yes to, and after this, Gaku stabs him with a red arrow for safety. On the other hand, we see Yuri telling the protagonist that to have her support, he must allow her to continue using the red arrow. Mirai agrees, but the girl still asks him why he wants to be God, as if this happens, he would have to leave Saki. There, Nas responds that as God, he could give her more love from heaven. In a change of scene, we see the detective reviewing everything that happened, and then his fiancée approaches and stabs him with the red arrow, telling him to talk in private. Later, we see Penema arriving in heaven with Suzuki's soul, and the other angels tell him they're in trouble because God is dying. The next day, the news reveals the identities of all the candidates, and that's why the detective and his fiancée decide to take the candidates to a refuge where there are no cameras or windows. In that, Mirai tells them that he should go talk to Professor Gaku, and the detective thinks he should go too, as they were high school classmates. He comments that Gaku was so intelligent that he dropped out of school 2 weeks after starting the year because he preferred to study alone without anyone bothering him, and in the present, Gaku talks to Naka and tells him that unlike other candidates, he wanted to die out of curiosity to know what it feels like, and if this election of God was really true, it would mean that if the other world exists and he wants to discover it, but he thinks none of that is true. There, Naka asks about the souls that the angels take when someone dies, but Gaku replies that it's nothing more than an illusion created by the creature pretending to be God, and that this creature extracts part of humans' energy. After this, he threatens Naka's angel, saying that if he doesn't tell him which angel has a specific power, he'll kill his candidate. The angel agrees, but with the condition that he gives Suzuki's white arrow to his candidate, Naka. Then the angel tells him that the special angel might be Nas since her power allows her to touch her candidate while no other angel can touch the candidates or objects on Earth. Only Nas can do that. He mentions that she was the one who saved Mirai from falling into the void, but he says that Nas still doesn't seem to realize her own power. Upon hearing this, Gaku contacts the Prime Minister and tells him that he wants to meet with the candidates in a stadium. After more than a month, the effect of the arrow disappeared from the detectives, and to retain their abilities, Mirai decides to arrow the detective so that he, in turn, can arrow his fiancée. That same night, Gaku uses his arrows to reach directly to the Prime Minister. After a few days, the Prime Minister announced Gaku's intentions to meet with the candidates on national television. To conclude, Gaku speaks in front of the camera and tells those who tried to kill the other candidates that unless all the candidates die within less than a second of each other, a new god will be born. This is his attempt to prevent them from trying to kill the candidates again. After this, Mirai and the others ask the angels if what Gaku said is true. In that, the angels confirm that it is true, as the last living candidate will be the new god, but if they all die at the same time, no one will be god. That night, Mirai talks about how now there's only 10% of believers in the world when it used to be 50%, and this decreased after what Gaku said, so even if one of them becomes God, because people won't accept it. After that, Saki asks if he truly wants to become God, to which he responds yes. Hearing this, Saki asks to talk alone. On the other hand, during a dinner with the minister, they reach an agreement with other countries about Gaku's plan. They agree with the idea of everyone dying at the same time so that no new god exists. Then, Mirai and Saki talk about everything they've experienced together and how their lives changed, and at dawn, Mirai thinks that they both didn't die in the past, and then they hold hands and return to the shelter. Several hours later, the meeting begins. We see Gaku waiting for the others in the center of the stadium along with Naka. Then we see the first to arrive were Saki and the protagonist, and behind them comes Yuri along with the detective and his fiancée. There, the detective, upon seeing Gaku, tries to talk to him. Gaku recognizes him and remembers the short time they talked together. There, Gaku explains his plan to prevent a false god from being created, and for that, he plans to kill the 3 candidates in front of him and then kill himself at the same time with Naka. Mirai plans to use his red arrow on Gaku to convince him to vote in his favor to become the new god. In that, Gaku asks the protagonist to speak privately, but the detective insists on accompanying them. Gaku agrees, and everyone else flies away to leave them alone. Once alone, he asks Mirai if he's truly willing to become God, to which the protagonist says yes, as if there's no God, many people who rely on their religion will die. Here, Gaku tells him that despite wanting to save so many lives, he'll have to kill him since he doesn't want to accept a god. After this, Mirai takes out his white arrow and points it at Gaku. On the other hand, we see the girls flying to one of the Prime Minister's mansions and discover it was a trap set by Naka. There, the fiancé tries to subdue him to arrow him with a red arrow, but they discover that Naka already had an arrow embedded. At that moment, he attacks with his white arrow, but she luckily manages to dodge it. Then, we see Mirai attempting to launch his white arrow, but Gaku flies and dodges it. After this, Gaku takes out his phone and shows a picture of Saki tied up, threatening to kill her unless Mirai renounces being God. There, Mirai says he renounces being God, but this disappoints Gaku as he preferred saving one life at the cost of millions. After this, Gaku takes out his white arrow and tells him that even though he renounced being God, he doesn't plan to let Mirai escape. He then mentions that if Mirai doesn't allow himself to be pierced by the white arrow, he'll tell Naka to kill Saki. In that moment, seconds pass and memories of Mirai with Saki flash through his mind, and suddenly Gaku launches his arrow, telling him that if he defends himself, Saki will die instantly. There, Mirai says that there are lives more valuable than his own, so he has decided to allow himself to be pierced by the white arrow. But at the moment the arrow was about to pierce him, Nas takes him in her arms and flies away to save his life. Until, for some reason, she stops in midair, remaining silent and letting go of Mirai. At that moment, a dark sphere surrounds Nas and begins to absorb her, as she apparently descended to the 2nd rank for interfering and had her wings and white arrow taken away from Mirai. After a few moments, Nas is freed, but now half of her body is made of stone. There, Gaku threatens Mirai again, saying that if he doesn't allow himself to be killed, Saki will die. In that, Gaku once again launches his white arrow, and the protagonist hesitates between defending himself or allowing himself to be killed. But when the arrow was about to pierce him, Saki appears in front of him and takes him away, as apparently the girls managed to convince Naka that it was wrong to kill when someone doesn't want to die. In response to this, Gaku asks Naka to return his white arrow, but he says nothing at that moment. Then, Yuri appears behind Gaku with her white arrow and launches it, but everyone is surprised because Nas also saves him from dying, as Mirai had said that he didn't want him to die either. This causes Nas to somehow return to being a special rank again, and she offers her wings and white arrow to the protagonist again, but he refuses. There, Gaku is confused as the angel saved him for the 2nd time. After this, he questions his actions and decides to leave. To stop him, Naka offers to be God, promising to tell him what's in heaven as long as he doesn't take his own life to find out for himself. Upon hearing this, the other candidates approve of this decision, and Naka ascends, with the angels surrounding him, initiating the ritual. At that moment, everything turns gray, and the wings and arrows of everyone disappear, and it seems like time has stopped, and only the candidates can move. There, Naka tells them that he'll erase the memories of everyone except the candidates, and then asks them if they want to keep their memories or forget everything about the god elections. There, Gaku says he wants to keep them, but Yuri prefers to forget everything. Mirai and Saki decide to remember everything. After this, Naka ascends and merges with the former god, disappearing from existence. Then time returns to normal, and the detectives along with Yuri don't know what's happening. With this, Mirai and Saki hold hands and walk home. In the sky, Naka feels as if a parasite is in his body and says it's unpleasant. Then we see Yuri now assisting Gaku and helping him investigate the arrows, even though she can't see them. On the other hand, we see Mirai with Saki's parents, and he has come to tell them that he will marry their daughter. Saki's parents give their approval, and then he and Saki go for a walk, and then go home where they now live alone. Days pass, and then we see Nas watching from the sky as Mirai and Saki get married, and upon seeing this, she becomes very happy. Then, Revel tells her that God is calling her, and she goes to where God is. There, God asks Nas what she was before being an angel, but she says she doesn't know and then leaves. Then God starts watching the other candidates how they are living their lives, and seeing that they are all happy, he is also happy. Suddenly, he says he has to do the work of a god and sees the people who are going to die, and he is too surprised to see how many people are committing suicide or killing others, wondering how the world can be like this. After thinking for a while, he extends his hand, and a bright sphere appears, and then we see all the angels fading away. There, an angel sees God again and sees that he has taken his own life, so he says that heaven is over and also fades away. Then Nas also disintegrates, and then all the people in the world also do, and Mirai, seeing this, hugs Saki, who also fades away, and thus the anime ends. Okay, the ending is really weird, so I want to look for the manga and compare its ending, and the truth is that it's similar, except that Naka judges his own existence more and values more things, and then he commits suicide, as we saw in the ending. After that, people die from the youngest to the oldest in that scale, and Gaku manages to understand that God is created through the consciousness of that spirituality. So, by creating something omnipotent, one can create and erase life in an instant. Thank you for watching the video. I'll see you in a few days with a new video. Don't forget to subscribe and check out my other videos.